in a small town called Anathoth in the land of Judah, a child was born destined to carry a message that few wanted to hear. His name was Jeremiah. His family was not ordinary, for they belonged to a line of priests from a very young age. His life was surrounded by teachings about God, sacrifices, and sacred laws. However, what would mark his destiny was not only his lineage, but a voice that would change his life forever. Jeremiah grew up like any child of his time, learning from his father and observing the customs of the people. But while others dreamed of abundant harvests or starting a family, something stirred within his heart. There was a special sensitivity in him, an ability to feel the pain of others as if it were his own. He was quiet, thoughtful, and often seemed to look beyond what others could see. One day, while still very young, something happened that left him breathless. It was not thunder or a terrifying vision, but something far deeper, in the deepest part of his being. He heard the voice of God. It was not a sound like the wind or a river, but a clear certainty that filled his entire soul. That voice told him that even before he was born, he had been chosen, that his life had a purpose, that he would be a prophet to the nations. Fear immediately took hold of him. Jeremiah did not feel ready. He was young, inexperienced, and he knew very well how difficult it was to speak in the name of God. He tried to resist, he said. He did not know how to speak, that he was only a boy, but the answer he received was firm and full of authority. He should not be afraid, because he would not be alone. God himself would put his words in his mouth. From that moment on, his life changed completely. He could no longer live like everyone else. He had been called to a difficult task. He had to speak to a people who had turned away from God, a people who worshipped idols, who had forgotten his laws, and who lived in injustice. Jeremiah began to see everything around him with different eyes. He saw temples full, but hearts empty. He saw sacrifices without obedience. He saw leaders who were meant to guide, but instead sought their own benefit. All of this caused him deep pain. It did not take long before he began to speak. His first words were not gentle. He warned the people about what would come if they did not change their ways. He spoke of destruction, of invasions, of a punishment that seemed inevitable if they continued to ignore God. The people did not respond well. Some mocked him, others became angry. No one wanted to hear bad news, much less accept that they were wrong. Jeremiah began to experience rejection. Friends drifted away. Even his own family started to look at him with distrust. Despite everything, he could not stop. There was a fire inside him that would not let him remain silent. Even when he tried to hold back, the words came out with greater force. It was as if his life depended on it. As time passed, his message grew more intense. He did not only speak of judgment, but also of hope. He said that after the pain would come restoration, that God would not abandon his people forever. But these words of comfort were few compared to his warnings. Jeremiah understood that his mission would not be easy. He would not be loved or admired. His role was not to please, but to speak the truth, and that truth hurt as he grew older. The weight of his calling grew heavier. He did not marry or have children. His life was completely devoted to the mission that had been given to him. This made him even more different from others. While others built families, he walked alone, carrying a message that seemed too heavy for one man. But in the middle of his loneliness, there was something he never lacked: the presence of God, even when he doubted, even when he wept, even when he felt weak. He always found the strength to continue. Thus began the story of a man who did not choose to be heard, but chose to obey. A man who did not seek fame, but to fulfill a purpose. A prophet who would be remembered not for the ease of his life, but for the courage of his heart. And what would come next would test every word he had spoken. Time did not make Jeremiah's mission any easier. On the contrary, each day seemed to bring new challenges. His voice continued to echo through the streets of Jerusalem, gates of the temple, and along the roads where people came and went. But instead of awakening repentance, his words stirred anger and rejection. Jeremiah spoke with clarity. He said that the people had abandoned God, that they trusted in idols made by human hands, and that their hearts were far from the truth. He warned that if they did not change, a great disaster would fall upon them. A powerful nation would come from the north and destroy everything they knew. Many thought he was mad. Others accused him of being a traitor. The priests and leaders, who were supposed to guide the people, began to see him as a threat. They did not like someone pointing out their mistakes. They did not want to lose their position or authority. Despite this, Jeremiah did not stop speaking. He had learned that his responsibility was not to please, but to obey every message he received. He delivered without changing anything, even though he knew it would bring him trouble. On one occasion, God asked him to do something unusual. He told him to take a linen belt and wear it. Then he was to hide it near a river. After some time, he was to go back for it. When he did, the belt was ruined, rotten, and worthless. Then he understood the message. That was how the people were. They had been chosen to be close to God, but they had become corrupted. Another time, he was told to go to a potter's house. There he saw how the man shaped the clay when something did not turn out right. He would start over again. Jeremiah understood that God had the power to shape and reshape his people, but he also saw that they could be broken if they refused to obey. His messages were clear, but the response remained the same. No one wanted to change. People preferred to listen to other prophets who spoke of peace and prosperity, messages that were pleasant and demanded nothing. This caused Jeremiah even more suffering. He was not only rejected, but also mocked. They called him extreme, accused him of lying. There were even those who sought to harm him. At one point, in deep despair, Jeremiah expressed his pain. He felt deceived. He felt the burden was too heavy. There were days when he wished he had never been born. Yet even in his sorrow, he could not abandon his mission. There came a moment when he tried to remain silent. He decided he would no longer speak in the name of God. He thought this would spare him from trouble, but inside him, something began to burn. It was like a fire he could not contain. He tried to stay quiet, but the words came out with even greater force. He realized he could not escape his calling. The situation in Judah grew worse. The kings would not listen. One of them, instead of repenting, became furious when he heard Jeremiah's words, when the prophet wrote his messages on a scroll and presented them. The king cut it piece by piece and burned it. It was an act of complete rejection. But this did not stop Jeremiah. He wrote everything again, adding even more words. His determination was firm. He knew that truth could not be destroyed by fire. The threats became more serious. He was beaten, imprisoned, and publicly humiliated. On one occasion, he was placed in stocks, an instrument that caused pain and shame. All this for speaking what no one wanted to hear. Even so, he did not stop. His love for the people was stronger than his pain. He did not desire their destruction, but their repentance. Every warning was also a call to change. Meanwhile, the danger he had announced was drawing near. The empire of Babylon was rising in power. Its armies advanced, conquering cities and subduing nations. What Jeremiah had spoken for years was beginning to take shape. But the people still did not understand. They believed nothing bad would happen to them. They thought the temple would protect them, that because they were the chosen people, they were safe. Jeremiah knew it was not so, and this filled him with sorrow. He could see the future clearly, but he could not prevent it. He could only warn. His life became a mixture of pain and faithfulness. Every day was a struggle between the desire to give up and the need to continue. But one thing was certain: he was not willing to betray the purpose he had been given. And so, the prophet continued on his path, knowing that the worst was still to come. The time of warnings was coming to an end. Everything Jeremiah had announced for years was beginning to be fulfilled before everyone's eyes. The army of Babylon advanced with strength, surrounding cities, tearing down walls, and leaving a trail of fear wherever it went. In Jerusalem, the atmosphere was tense. Some were beginning to feel afraid, but many still clung to a false sense of security. They believed the city would never fall. They thought the temple was enough to protect them. But Jeremiah knew the truth. His words became even more direct. He said that resisting Babylon would only bring more destruction. He advised surrender in order to save their lives. This was taken as betrayal to the leaders. Jeremiah was no longer just an uncomfortable prophet. He was now seen as an enemy. Rejection turned into persecution. He was arrested, accused of weakening the people with his words. The princes rose against him and demanded his death. To them, Jeremiah was taking away the people's hope. Instead of killing him immediately, they chose to punish him in a cruel way. They threw him into an empty cistern. There was no water, only thick mud at the bottom. Jeremiah was trapped there, slowly sinking. No food, no light, no way out. It was a slow death in that dark place. The prophet could have lost all hope, but even there, he was not alone. A foreign man, moved with compassion, spoke on his behalf before the king. Because of this, Jeremiah was rescued. They pulled him out with ropes, covered in mud, weak but alive. Despite everything he had suffered, he remained firm. He did not change his message. He did not soften his words. He continued to say what God had shown him. The king of Judah, filled with doubt, sought Jeremiah in secret. He wanted to hear the truth, but he was afraid of how others would react. In private, he asked what would happen. Jeremiah spoke clearly. He said that if the king surrendered, he would live, but if he resisted, the city would be destroyed. The king listened, but he did not have the courage to obey. Fear of men was stronger than his desire to do what was right. And then the inevitable happened. Babylon attacked Jerusalem with all its force. The walls were broken down. Hunger consumed the people inside the city. There was no food, no hope. The suffering was beyond words. At last, the city fell. Soldiers entered, destroyed the temple, burned houses, and took many people captive. It was a moment of deep pain for the nation. Jeremiah saw everything he had spoken come to pass. There was no joy in his heart, only sorrow. Every word he had said was fulfilled, but it was not a reason to celebrate. It was an open wound. The king tried to escape during the night, but he was captured. His fate was terrible. His sons were killed before his eyes. And then he lost his sight. He was taken away in chains. Meanwhile, Jeremiah was treated differently. The king of Babylon had heard about him. He knew he had not lied. For that reason, he gave orders that no harm should come to him. They gave him a choice. He could go to Babylon and live in comfort, or remain in the ruined land with the people who were left behind. Jeremiah chose to stay. He did not abandon his people, not even in their darkest moment. He remained among the survivors. He walked among ruins, ashes, and memories of what had once been a city full of life. And in the middle of that destruction, his voice changed. They were no longer only warnings. Now they were words of comfort. He spoke of a different future, of a new beginning. He said that God had not abandoned them forever, that after judgment would come restoration, that there would be a new covenant, not written on stone, but on the heart. These words began to bring hope in the middle of pain. Even though everything seemed lost, Jeremiah still believed in a better future, but peace did not last long. The few leaders who remained made poor decisions. They acted out of fear, without seeking guidance. And once again they ignored the words of the prophet. Jeremiah's journey was not over yet, and new trials were still to come. After the fall of Jerusalem, silence covered the land like a heavy shadow. The streets that were once full of life were now empty. Houses lay in ruins. The temple, which had been the pride of the people, was destroyed. Everything seemed to have come to an end. Jeremiah walked among the remains of what had once been a great city. His eyes saw the pain, but his heart remained firm. Despite everything, he did not stop speaking. Now his message was different. He no longer warned about what was to come, because it had already happened. Now he spoke of hope. Among the survivors, there was fear. They did not know what to do. Babylon had left a governor to oversee the land. But stability was fragile. People were suspicious, afraid of another attack, another tragedy. In the midst of that uncertainty, Jeremiah continued to guide with his words. He said they should remain in the land, that they should not flee. He assured them that God was still with them, even after everything that had happened. But once again, the people chose not to listen. A group of leaders, driven by fear, made a decision. They wanted to flee to Egypt. They believed they would be safe there, far from the power of Babylon. Before doing so, they went to Jeremiah. They asked him to seek God on their behalf. They promised to obey whatever answer they received. Jeremiah prayed. He waited, and when the answer came, it was clear they were not to go to Egypt. They were to remain in the land. If they fled, they would face the same destruction they were trying to escape. But when they heard this, they refused to accept it. They accused Jeremiah of lying. They said it was not God speaking, but his own imagination, and instead of obeying, they did the opposite. They took Jeremiah by force and brought him with them to Egypt. The prophet, once again, was dragged into a situation he had not chosen, far from his home, far from Jerusalem. He walked into a foreign land, yet even there, he did not stop fulfilling his mission. In Egypt, he continued to speak. He warned that this place would not save them either. He said that Babylon would come there as well, that disobedience always brings consequences. But the people did not want to listen. They had made their decision, and their hearts were closed. Despite everything, Jeremiah did not change. His faithfulness did not depend on the place, nor on the response of the people. He remained the same man who had heard the voice of God in his youth, the same one who had been called before he was born during those years. He also wrote words that reflected his pain, deep laments over the fall of Jerusalem, honest expressions of sorrow, but also of hope. In the midst of suffering, he still believed that God had not finished with his people. As for his personal life, it is known that he did not have a wife or children. From the beginning, he had been told not to build a family. This was not easy. In a culture where family was so important, living alone was unusual. But this also had a purpose. His life itself was a message. It reflected the pain that was coming, the loneliness the people would face. His dedication was complete. He did not only speak, he lived every word. The years passed, and his body began to weaken. He had suffered much: rejection, beatings, hunger, sorrow, yet his spirit remained strong. There are not many clear details about his death. Some ancient accounts say he was rejected until the end. There are even stories that say he died in Egypt, a victim of those who never wanted to listen. Others say he simply passed away in silence, far from his land. What is certain is that his life was not easy. He was not honored in his time. He was not celebrated by the crowds, but his impact was deep. Jeremiah was a man who spoke when no one wanted to listen, who remained firm when everything was falling apart, who wept for his people, yet never stopped loving them. And even though many ignored his words in life, time would prove that he had spoken the truth. His story is not over, because his legacy goes far beyond his life. Time did not erase the voice of Jeremiah. Although his life ended far from recognition and without honor, his words remained with a strength that carried through generations. What was once rejection in his time became teaching over the years. Jeremiah was not a king. He was not a warrior. He had no riches and no family to carry on his name. His life seemed simple on the outside, but it was deep. In purpose, he dedicated every day to delivering a message that was not his own, but God's, and that made him one of the most remembered prophets. His story is different from many others. It is not filled with visible victories or moments of glory. It is filled with tears, inner struggle, and moments when pain seemed stronger than hope. For this reason, over time, he became known as the weeping prophet. But his tears were not a sign of weakness. They were the reflection of a heart that deeply loved his people. He suffered as he saw them lost. As he watched them reject the truth, he did not speak from anger, but from pain. Among the most important things he left behind was his message of a new beginning. In the middle of judgment, he announced something surprising. He spoke of a new covenant. It would not be like the old one, based on laws written on stone. This new covenant would be written on the hearts of people. It would be a deeper, closer relationship. That message became a light in the middle of darkness. Even though the people were taken far away, even though they lost their land and their city, they did not lose hope. Jeremiah's words reminded them that the end was not the end. He also left teachings about obedience. His life showed that following God does not always bring comfort. Sometimes it means walking alone, facing rejection, and enduring hardship, but it also showed that there is a strength that sustains. Even in the hardest moments, about his age, there is no exact number, but it is known that he lived many years, long enough to see the fulfillment of his prophecies, from his youth to his old age. His life was marked by a single mission. His death, although not clearly recorded, was not the end of his influence. His writings were preserved, his words were read again and again, and his example continued to speak long after his final day. Over time, the people began to understand. The warnings that once seemed harsh now made sense. The promises that once felt distant began to bring hope. Jeremiah taught that truth is not always easy to accept, but it is always necessary. He taught that true love does not only comfort, it also corrects, and that even in the middle of judgment, there is space for restoration. His life also leaves an open question for every generation. What is done when truth is uncomfortable? Is it ignored or heard? Is it rejected or accepted? Throughout history, many have found inspiration in his example. People who face difficulties, who feel unheard, who struggle to do what is right. In Jeremiah, they see someone who went through the same and did not give up. He was not perfect. He doubted. He wept. He grew tired. But he never abandoned his purpose, and that made him an extraordinary man. Today, his story is still alive, not as a simple story of the past, but as a reminder that every life has a purpose, that obedience has value, and that even in the darkest moments, hope can remain alive. This is how the story of Jeremiah comes to an end. A man chosen before birth, a prophet who spoke with courage, a heart that never stopped feeling, a testimony that continues to echo even after so much time. If this message has touched your heart, you are invited to join this family of faith. Subscribe to this channel and join us each week to continue learning from the stories and teachings God has for us. Turn on the notification bell so you do not miss any video. Thank you for being here, and may God bless your life.